The strife in the Strait of Hormuz is creating a gulf between the U.S. and its European allies.
There's a debate. To put it mildly, there's a debate about this between Europe and America.
New U.S. Acting Defense Secretary Mark Esper will spend his first days on the job at NATO headquarters, trying to convince his European counterparts their own interests are at stake in the Strait, too. U.S. Ambassador to NATO Kay Bailey Hutchison has been laying the groundwork.
It's not a NATO function, but Iran attacking ships and saying that they're going to go back into preparing for nuclear weapons, that's pretty strong. We've got to stand up to it.
But Esper is still likely to have a tough time getting European support for military action.
One of the problematic parts of Trump's agenda from the very beginning is this idea of basically every nation fighting for itself in a kind of arena of actors. That's the way some of the people around Trump put it in the beginning of his term. So I mean, in my view, that doesn't work.
Then there's the U.S. president's casual linkage of Article 5, all allies' solemn responsibility to defend each other, to how much they spend on their militaries. Now, there is Article 3, which states that all governments should continually and effectively improve their capabilities, and to be sure, some don't. But never before has the commitment to collective defense been quantified or questioned. Europeans are spending more on their militaries now and will spend even more in the future. But rather than easing tensions with the U.S., a new front has been opened. That's because the European Union is earmarking almost $600 million for its own defense projects that might exclude the U.S. Washington is threatening to retaliate. Still, senior NATO officials believe things will work out because the U.S. and European defense industries are already intertwined.
So I think altogether the picture is not so much that of a fortress America, of a fortress Europe, but that of a transatlantic market that is in place and that from this perspective is likely to continue.
And in its quest to convince Europeans to ratchet up pressure on Iran, the U.S. may take heart from recent history. It took years, but all allies now agree with the U.S. conclusion that Russia is violating the Intermediate-Range Nuclear Treaty, the INF. They also support the U.S. decision to declare the treaty dead on August 2nd, unless Moscow announces it will destroy its program before then, a unanimous NATO stance that once seemed impossible to achieve.
Terry Schultz reporting there. And we can take you now to Terry in Brussels, where she is still at the NATO HQ. Good to see you, Terry. Let's pick up where that report left off with the end of that landmark arms control pact between the U.S. and Russia looming in the background. What are ministers advocating where you are? Do they want to beef up defense, or do they want to try and bring Russia back into the fold?
Officially, Layla, ministers are still giving Russia until August 2nd to come back into compliance, which would mean destroying this massive, expensive missile system, and nobody thinks that's going to happen. But they definitely want to be seen as giving every last chance to the Kremlin. There's expected to be a NATO-Russia meeting next week so that at least NATO can say, look, we tried until the very last minute not to abrogate this treaty, not to have this treaty declared defunct. But at the same time, they're saying they have to look at what a post-INF world looks like, a world without controls on intermediate-range nuclear weapons, and that is going to mean beefing up NATO's own defenses. There is a missile defense system in NATO. It would have to be reconfigured to look at the new threat coming from Russian missiles that then could be trained on European countries. So it's a really big deal here, and people are quite nervous about it, but we won't be hearing much about the options until after the INF is declared dead on August 2nd. In the probable case that Russia doesn't come into compliance.
And Terry, that isn't the only major foreign policy issue causing concern where you are. Of course, the escalating tensions between U.S. and Iran, I imagine, are front and center there as well. What's NATO's position, and have European members of the alliance expressed where they stand?
NATO doesn't have a position on Iran. It doesn't even want to have to take a position on Iran. At the moment, it says this is between the U.S. and Tehran, and it very much hopes for a de-escalation. Nobody wants to see a war in the Gulf, especially complicated for European Union members who are still trying to keep the nuclear deal together with Tehran. So de-escalation of tensions is definitely the first priority. But we've just seen U.S. Acting Defense Secretary Mark Esper arrive and have some remarks with Secretary General Stoltenberg. He is definitely trying to give allies the impression that he is a supporter of NATO. He has served in NATO posts, and he wants to reassure allies that the U.S. is not going to take any rash actions. At the same time, we just heard the UK Defense Secretary come in, and she said, look, we are very much in favor of de-escalation. We don't want to see any military action there. Europeans are definitely not in favor of escalation. At the same time, again, if they're saying it's a U.S.-Iran issue, they really don't have that much leverage over Washington. But Mark Esper is going to be updating allies in just the next couple of hours, and I believe that Washington will be trying to reassure them that nothing is going to happen without consultation.
Terry Schultz in Brussels, thank you for your continued coverage.